With the latest agriculture news from across the state and nation, it's time for the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. Here's your host, Sabrina Halvorson.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us this morning on the AgNet News Hour. I am Sabrina Halvorson here with Lorrie Boyer. Morning, Lorrie.
Good morning.
So we are going to start out today talking about a situation that is rapidly changing and kind of confusing. So I want to start it out with just a little bit of transparency between us and our listeners. And you know, we, at the time that we are behind our microphones talking about this, now this is Tuesday that you and I are talking. It's going to be on the air on Wednesday and then out there on the podcast forever. So, you know, keep in mind as we're talking about this that some things can change between the time that you and I are talking and our listeners are hearing it. And that's kind of important to preface this all with because of how rapidly things are moving along with our new presidential administration. But what I wanted to start out with talking about today is the president's newest order from Monday, halting a lot of different types of government spending, primarily grants and loans from the federal government. And this is an important order to be talking about because essentially the president's order pauses all grants and loans that are dispersed by the federal government. This is according to an internal memo that was sent to agencies on Monday. And it was only, the memo itself only 2 pages long, and it's halting everything, causing a lot of confusion in these agencies, these federal agencies. But the reason that we wanted to talk about it today and the reason that it can be important in our agricultural industries is because there are a lot of USDA grants and loans that could potentially be affected by this, that money frozen. So one thing that was pointed out is it does not necessarily affect money that's given directly to individuals. So like Medicare, Social Security. I believe that would include things like SNAP benefits or, financial assistance like that. However, money given to organizations or to states, grants given out to organizations, things like that, that money is now frozen. So what could that mean for USDA? That could mean a lot of USDA programs funding is now halted. So basically things like rural development loans and grants. The USDA does a lot of those, and a lot of those go to like different community facilities or different businesses and utility services, things like that. That money now included in the freeze. Also things like federal state marketing improvement programs. That's a grant program that helps state agencies with creating and improving market opportunities for ag products. That money frozen. Some aspects of the specialty crop block grant program, from what I understand at this time, some of that also frozen. The farmers market promotion program, that is money that helps farmers markets, all over the nation with their operations and promotions and in a lot of different aspects. So again, that money frozen as well. And farmers markets are also very important for a lot of smaller California farmers. So again, a lot of this information is stuff that we're still wading through. We don't know a lot about it, but it's important to bring up because these are actions that can have a real effect on our farmers around the nation.
Yeah, there is still a lot of questions even on what this means for Medicaid and food stamps. I'm sure we will know more soon, but it is a sweeping freeze. Disaster assistance payments are also included in that. Of course, we know with the hurricanes that we've mentioned recently and the wildfires, what that means for those folks. And of course, in agriculture, the disaster payments that farmers are currently applying for here and the crop insurance and all those things that we are getting ready to get going here for this next year. I do, though, see and kind of understand, I think I understand anyway, why the Trump administration is doing this. They want to get a handle on all the grants and all the monies that are going out. And the Biden administration was criticized several times for just printing money, literally printing money and handing it out and not having accountability. And there was a lot of misspending, even at USDA. There was a lot of misspending that went on as a result of that because there weren't checks and balances in place. So I do kind of actually understand where President Trump and the administration is coming in and saying, well, okay, let's take a look at this. Let's make sure that money's going where it's supposed to go, that it has checks and balances. I think we desperately need that in all of the grant money that goes out there. Even in my personal experience with running grants, there were times when I was like, wow, this is really what this grant's paying for. Because if you don't spend the money, you lose the money. I mean, I don't know if that's a part of this, but on ridiculous things that I'm like, my taxpayer dollars are paying for this. So I see where there might be some responsibility to taxpayer dollars in doing this. And it also concerns me just a little bit. While I think a lot of the programs, especially the ones you mentioned, are important, it also concerns me when you look at the grand scope of this, that our country, maybe a large percent of our country, is operating on grants from the federal government. I'm not sure if that sits well with me either.
Mm. And that's an interesting thought. How much of how much of these programs, how much of their budgets rely on federal grants, and what's it going to do to them when they don't have these federal grants available? Are we going to be losing our farmer markets programs because they rely so heavily on federal grants, things like that? These are things that we'll continue talking about. We do need to take a quick break, but we'll be right back. This is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. She's Lorrie Boyer. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. We are starting off this morning talking about President Trump's action on Monday, putting a pause on federal grants and loans. And there are many, many agricultural programs that rely on federal grants and loans that can be affected by this. And again, as I stated at the beginning of our of our first segment when we first started the show, things change. And from the time that you and I, Lori, are sitting behind our microphones talking about this to the time when everybody's hearing it, there could be changes. But we are going with what we know at this time. Things are still developing, but we wanted to talk about it because this could have a big effect on many of our programs for our farmers and ranchers around the state and around the nation. And, you were saying before the break that you can kind of see why the president decided to do this pause. And I understand what you're saying, that, anytime when you're dealing with a budget and you're seeing money just flowing through, the best thing to do is to stop spending and see where everything is going, and then figure out, am I spending as wisely as I should be? So now, of course, that's kind of from a personal budget way, but now taking it trillions of times bigger, looking at our nation, seeing that we are having, you know, so much money just flowing through this program, that program. What's the best way that we should be actually running these programs? And that's an important question to ask. Is stopping all the funding that these programs are depending on the right way to go about it? I don't know. But then I'm not president, I'm a radio host. So fortunately, I don't have to make that decision. But it will be affecting millions of people.
And again, it doesn't surprise me for another reason. When he was voted in, we knew that his agenda is from the bottom up. And that's
Mhm.
exactly what he's doing here. And another thing is, I've always told my circles that I feel like President Trump has always ran in his first term, always ran a government like a business, not necessarily like a bureaucratic government, but like a business. So for those two reasons, I really do feel like this falls in line with how he runs things, what he says, and what he's doing. But to your point, and beside the point, is that it does affect a lot of USDA, especially on the loan side, the operating loans, some of the loans that we are needing right now to get by, to get through, as we know the high input costs are out there. Crop insurance is huge. All the major ag advisors and all the think tanks in agriculture are telling farmers, do not skimp on crop insurance. If you're going to try to figure out where to cut corners, that's one corner you don't want to cut. And of course, crop insurance is a big part of the budget. And I'm not sure, I can't tell you how much grant money filters into that or not, but definitely there is financial aid, there's loans and all those things that fall into that. So whether it's a large piece or a small piece, I don't know, but it's all lumped together in one sum. And that is a big deal for our farmers and ranchers. And that's why a lot of them are continuing to farm and ranch with that assistance. If not, for that assistance, I think we'd have a larger depopulation of our farmers and ranchers, or shouldn't say depopulation, but getting out of the business is what I mean. Depopulating the business.
Right, right. And from what I am reading and understanding, this this order should not affect money that goes directly to individuals. So like crop insurance payments, hopefully, would not be affected by
Good.
this.
That's good.
So, however, I would not be surprised if we saw some changes in that program. I know that there has been a lot of talk about that, that President Trump does want to help farmers, but I wouldn't be surprised if crop insurance and other government assistance for farmers came under more scrutiny, because again, it is another way that the nation is spending money. And like you pointed out, and I think that was a very astute point, that he does run the country like a business. And this, again, is a very business type move. When you are trying to get your, again, the business budget under control, stop spending and reevaluate how you're spending money. And then, another part of this too, and we're just about having to get to another break here in a minute, but um, I also want to have the conversation on with him ending all of the DEI, the diversity, equity, inclusion programs, as well. And then also pausing a lot of the government funding. I think that is also going to have a big effect on the USDA as well, because of the last administration, the Biden administration had such a DEI focus and created so many programs that relied on kind of this umbrella of the DEI programs. How many times did we hear about creating programs for underserved communities? All of that falls under the DEI umbrella. Those programs now also are cut and just automatically ended, in addition to funding for other programs. And, again, as we head into the break, I want to point out, you and I are not saying that this is right or wrong. We just want to get information out so that people will know more about what's going on. And we'll continue talking about this right after the break. This is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. She's Lorrie Boyer. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. Here's Sabrina Halvorson.
We are talking this morning, starting off talking about the president's latest issuance of an order that is halting funding, pausing funding, not stopping it, but it was a pause of federal funding for federal grants and loans. And again, making the point that from what I'm reading and understanding, this has to do with grants and loans given to not to individuals. So again, things like government assistance, SNAP, food stamps, Social Security, disability payments, Medicare, things like that should not be affected by this, from what I'm understanding. However, your grants for programs like farmers markets and a lot of other USDA programs that help communities with agriculture, or farm businesses, grants, farm businesses that applied for certain grants, that grant money is now paused. So there's a lot. And it seems like every time we talk about what the president is doing, you and I will always say there's going to be legal action on this. Well, there's already legal action on this. And I think we're going to see more, because you can't, the government already gave those grants out. You can't now go back and say, oh, well, we're not going to actually give you this money. So, I mean, and that was part of the problem. It's not just for future grants. It's for grant money that organizations are expecting right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And it includes contractors and things like that. I don't want to see people losing their jobs or businesses suffering, but it is a pause, and hopefully it will pick up after the administration has the chance to weed through some of this. Before the break, you talked about the DEI, or environmental justice, and USDA, had very much a big focus on that. And boy, did we talk about that a lot, it seems like, last year. So what that means for this, I don't know exactly, but I do know that under the Biden administration, and I apologize, I can't remember the official name of it, but they created a committee, or an advisory committee under the auspices of USDA, just for this reason. So what that means for those folks and that committee and the jobs and all those things has yet to be seen. And while I believe that underserved farmers should definitely get their piece of the pie, just my opinion, I also, I know that there was a couple litigation cases on reverse discrimination. I'm not sure that other people shouldn't have gotten their piece just based on environmental justice, I guess, if you will. I think it should be a metrics-based thing, but that's a little bit beside the point.
But you're right, Lori. There was some legal action regarding the the previous administration's USDA and their work for underserved farmers. There was some legal action, and I know exactly the case you're talking about, but for some reason I can't think of who it was or where it was from, what state it originated in.
It was a Midwestern state. I remember that
Yeah.
much.
And yeah, there was talk about, because there was such a focus on the underserved population and making things right that had gone generations not being right. There were some farmers in the Midwest who were feeling like they were completely being left out. And so there was legal action, and I don't know how that ended up. I think it's due for you and I to revisit that and take a look, which we will do. But for now, all of the government, all of the federal DEI programs have been ended. I'm seeing a lot of things online, just in social media, people talking about that they don't, they don't have a job because their program was eliminated, and which is another interesting move by eliminating any federal government DEI program and ending closing those offices and ending those jobs, and then removing the funding for a lot of programs that went to these communities. It's going to have a big effect. And again, I'm not in a position to say this is the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do. I just want to say this is going to have a big effect. Here's what it could be.
Yeah. And I'm not either. But again, I'll say it for the third time. It shouldn't surprise us based on, we know he goes bottom up. We know he runs a country like a business. And this is exactly what a business owner would do. This is exactly what I would do. And he has also been very forthright on a man is a man and a woman is a woman. And there's not transgender favoritism. And so this is pretty progressive, but we put in a lot of transgender rights last year and used a lot of grant and federal money to do so. And a lot of Americans were not okay with that in the first place. And yet the Biden administration moved forward with that. Now, Trump, we know his personal stance. We know his government stance on this. And so taking money away from those programs that directly serve transgenders' rights, I just does not surprise me at all. I know it's a little off topic when you and I talk about ag and staying in the ag space, but as you look at it from a macro point of view, that money might go back into something ag or something rural, which is where you and I spend most of our time talking about and dealing with. I don't know that for sure. But again, when I'm reading through that, I mean, this is stuff that is at the top of his pile of undoing or at least weeding through.
Right. And I think a lot of this also is him fulfilling his travel or his campaign promises too, the things that he campaigned on that he was elected for. And you're right, this is not shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. These are all things that he talked about doing, and then he was elected into office. Um, Again, though, I think that with ending the federal grant programs, or with, I shouldn't say ending, let's not cause a panic, with just pushing the pause button on some of these federal grants, though, I think it brings up, and you talked about this, though, the idea of how many federal grants there are out there, especially in the agricultural space. There are a lot of federal grants, and pausing them to take a closer look, and figure out where exactly all of this money is going. I can see the pros and cons of this. Like you keep pointing out, that is how you would run a business. You do need to know exactly where your spending is going. And I think that there's been so much spending, maybe we don't know exactly where the spending is going. On the other hand, again, this is going to make things just extremely difficult for the organizations that rely on this money. We need to take a quick break, but I know that you've got something to say. We will come to you, Lori, right after this. This is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. She's Lori Boyer. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. We are talking about the president halting the grants and loans from federal government. Lori?
Okay, so I can't tell you here, especially in the last few weeks before the new administration, how many times though over the years the farmers have told me they don't want handouts. They don't want
Right.
government handouts. Even though I refer to crop insurance, that is not a government handout because these farmers are paying in. They really are. And so I also see here the fact that when we're talking about grants, that's money that typically is given out without expectation of payment in return
Right.
and or money exchange in return. And so I would suspect that a lot of the agriculture industry, a lot of the farmers, the boots on the ground farmers, they really don't want the grants anyway. They don't really want the handouts anyway. I could be wrong in some cases. And in other cases, if you're a beginning farmer or something does happen or you're devastated by a natural disaster, you might need a little bit of help getting a leg up, getting back into the game. And I fully support that. But I would suspect that a lot of farmers and ranchers are going to say, you know what, we didn't want these grants anyway. And a lot of them don't take advantage of. And I personally know a few right in my neck of the woods that don't use government programs for this reason exactly, because they don't want their livelihood to be riding on government dollars.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point. We do hear from farmers all the time how they don't want government handouts. They don't want other people to get government handouts. But yet, there are a lot of government handouts in agriculture. There just simply is. There's a lot of, and in fact, even the last time President Trump was in office, because of the tariff wars that he put in place for other political reasons, farmers kind of got the short end of that stick. But what he did was create another handout for farmers to help supplement that income, and he was praised for that. So that was kind of a different. In that case, they were okay with taking it because it was, went along with the president's plan. But I think the bigger issue here is that this money isn't necessarily money that goes right to farmers directly. So it's not something that, like they don't get a check in their mailbox from the government with these grants and loans. What this money goes to is the programs that help the farmers, like help programs that help create markets, larger markets for the farmers to sell their products. The programs that help create farmers markets, a different type of market, but farmers markets for farmers to go to so that they can sell, directly to consumer, or community programs like farm to school programs, things like that. That money comes from federal grants so that schools can buy products directly from farmers. The schools can buy their produce and milk and things directly from the farmers, which benefits the farmers again. But that money also comes from federal grants. And so these are the type of programs that are going to be affected by this freeze. So while it's not necessarily a check coming directly to the farmer, it is building up the programs that a lot of our farmers actually do. And small farmers is what I mean. Our family farms, our smaller farmers, not our giant, you know, great big Cargills or whatever. They may not be affected, but the farmer that's supplying daily milk to the schools, they are the ones who will be affected by losing these programs.
Yeah, and you certainly bring up a good point, and those are so very important, and not only to the money side of it and business side of it, but health, the health side of it. So I think those are very, very valid points on what you're talking about. The first one, though, that just pops in my mind is this last round of the Regional Ag Promotion Program. And that is so important. When I talk to the ag groups, US Wheat Associates, sorghum producers, I mean, they're using that to build these markets. They're using that to bring in a higher price for our product, which will in turn help keep the farmers in business, which then, of course, you look at this great big cycle. That's going to keep food on the table for all of us and hopefully keep our costs down at the grocery store.
That's an excellent point. I didn't even think about that program, but that is another federally funded grant slash loan type program, right?
Yes.
Right. So that is another one that could be affected. And that program has had some very good reviews. People, like you mentioned, the organizations that are using it to build up these programs for our farmers, that money has become very important.
Yeah, and even though it goes on a global scale, which is good, I think, because we're building these outside markets, it really does hit home. It hits home for our local producers, for our people that are out in our backyard fields that are doing these things for us. And they need that support, they need that market development. Our whole industry rides on markets, market disruption. I mean, and it doesn't take much to disrupt markets in general, but really our ag markets. I get reminded ever so often of how fragile the ag markets really are.
Yeah, and you do a lot more with ag markets on a daily basis than I do. I mean, you actually, in some radio stations around the nation, you are actually reading the ag markets in the mornings, which I don't do. So you are much more in touch with what the ag markets, how important they are. But if we don't have ag markets, and we're not talking about like a grocery store type market, we're talking about a global market with other nations buying our products. If we don't continue to build those up, our agriculture fails.
Oh yeah, yeah. Imports and exports. I mean, you and I talked about ports before. I mean, COVID is a huge example of what happens when you have weak markets and you're really relying on imports and exports. So little off topic, but this all ties in together with
Hmm.
what's going on with this pause in federal loans and grants.
Yeah. We'll continue talking about this. We do need to take another quick break. This is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. She's Lorrie Boyer. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. Here's Sabrina Halvorson.
Good morning once again. We are talking this morning about President Trump's latest action. Well, I say latest action, a lot could happen between the time that we're talking and people are listening, but his action from Monday, late Monday, when he paused federal loans and grants and as Lori has pointed out, that was a business move. And, the nation did elect President Trump once again, knowing that he's more of a businessman. So when you come into a business and you see that there's money bleeding out, what do? You stop the spending, right? So we shouldn't be surprised by this action. But what we have been doing this morning is trying to take a look at what this could mean for agricultural programs. And once again, I feel the need to put in my disclaimer. You and we're not saying this is right or wrong. We do not take a partisan stance on this. We just want to point out here are the ways that it could affect our farmers, which is the space that you and I operate in. So, just before we went to the last break, you brought up a great point about the RAP program, and how programs like that can have a big impact on our agricultural markets, the places where, you know, globally our farmers are selling products.
So, right before the end of last year, the Biden administration went ahead and issued the second round of RAP funding. But there was a first round before that. There was a first round, I don't know, a couple of years before that. And there was a lot of tracking that went on that I'm aware of anyway, in doing my interviews. And there was some proven benefits to that RAP program. And I think directly what comes to top of mind is US Wheat Associates. They were able to create more markets for the white wheat, and that is what we create bread from and dough from. That's the bakeable wheat. They created all kinds of new markets. They were able to get into countries we haven't been in before. And that is going to be continued with the second round of funding that they just received that is now on pause. So the point there is that there is some beneficial use to the grants and programs. And I would suspect that in all the grants or programs, ag or not ag, I mean, somebody had a good idea and the grants came out and they're intended for good use. They're intended for beneficial use. But what ends up happening is we lose some of the accountability. There's wasteful spending. Things get spent on things they shouldn't. In a lot of cases, again, this is just a little bit of personal experience I have in the grant world, the nonprofit world. I've got just enough to make me dangerous. But a lot of times the grants are not supposed to go for salaries. Often a federal grant, and I think I'm right still, a federal grant is more for operational costs or for needs, for putting things out into a community like a program or a playground or something beneficial for more than just one person. And oftentimes these grants, and as you pointed out, aren't supposed to go to individuals, but a lot of times they find loopholes and I'm being general here, I hope I'm not causing any waves, loopholes in order to pay new people, to pay for new positions, to pay for a salary, and they're not supposed to in not all grants, but a lot of grants. So I'm wondering, I'm just throwing this out there because I'm wondering if some of the Trump administration, eh, as they're weeding through these, are seeing that or saw that and is looking at that as part of the whole reason for pausing this. And again, kind of that accountability and where is this money actually going? And, Trump even criticized the Biden administration for being wasteful in a lot of areas. And I think that all is part of this.
Right. I think that you're absolutely right, especially that last comment there where, the President Trump has criticized a lot the Biden administration for spending in ways that, and of course the Biden administration thought that this was the important way to spend money. We're in a complete reversal now with the Trump administration thinking that that was a complete waste of money, and now this is the right way to spend money. So anytime that we see an administration change like this from two extremely different people and administrations, there's going to be big moves like this. So it was expected. I don't know that it was expected to be at this level, this extreme, or this fast. Not only so quick in the administration, he was a week in office when he put this in, but also he announced it late Monday and it went into effect Tuesday morning, overnight. And I think that, and what we've seen so far with a lot of President Trump's policy changes have been that quick. It's a snap of a finger, and you have to completely change how you're doing things. And that in itself, I think, is making things more difficult with not even, I mean, just to start with understanding what this order affects. How many of our USDA programs will this affect? At first glance, and the first bit of research that we've been able to do, again, it's any money from the federal government that goes to, different entities, anything except for individuals. So if the money is coming from the federal government going directly to a farmer's mailbox, that should not be affected. Money that goes to programs to help the farmers, that money is what is affected, from what we're understanding at this point.
Yes. Yeah. So we'll probably know more here as this unfolds. I would anticipate that the pause won't be in place for too terribly long. Trump does not seem to be the type of person that's going to string things out for the heck of it. That makes
No.
sense.
Yeah.
That's just a feeling I get. There's nothing to back that up. There's no fact checking. It's just kind of being here, watching these things and being a part of this every day on what's going on with our USDA and our ag world, which then, of course, all these other things are filtering over into. Is I don't think it's just going to be a long drawn out process for the heck of it. I think he wants to keep things going. I think he wants things to be successful, but he doesn't want to be wasteful about it either. So I imagine his charge will be quick.
Yeah, I think you're right. He's not one to really let any grass grow under his feet, I don't think. So we do need to take another quick break, and then we'll be back. This is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. She's Lorrie Boyer. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. So we have been talking about President Trump's latest move to pause federal spending on grants and loans. I also have something else I just wanted to talk about really briefly, unless you've got more on that, Lorrie.
I don't really.
Okay, so just kind of a little fun note that former Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack, I don't know if you've seen this yet, Lori, but he has been appointed as the CEO of the World Food Prize Foundation.
I did
Vilsack,
see that. Yeah.
yeah, so Tom Vilsack, we know what his next job will be. So after he served the last time, he went, I think, what did he go to, dairy or something? And so now this time he is going to be CEO of the World Food Prize Foundation. So I found that to be interesting and just kind of a fun fact for our morning to wrap up all the heavy talk.
Yes. And he is going to be working on global impacts of food security and sustainable agriculture. And those were two things that I did actually talk about with regard to Vilsack the last time he was in office with the Biden administration. So I guess that doesn't overly surprise me. I
Mm-mm.
don't know a whole lot about the World Food Prize Foundation in general, but I learned real quick today. And so it seems fitting.
Yeah, it seems like exactly the right position for him because you're right. When he was Ag Secretary, I mean, how much did we report um, on exactly that, on sustainable agriculture? I think he maybe coined the phrase climate smart agriculture because we reported on it so much. So he from this news release that the World Prize Foundation sent out. It says that Vilsack's appointment builds on his longstanding relationship with the foundation, where he served on the Council of Advisors and Board of Directors, offering invaluable insights, it says, that have shaped its missions and initiatives. He also served 2 terms as U.S. Secretary of Agriculture, 2 terms as Governor of Iowa, and was involved in several organizations focused on agricultural trade and sustainable food production. So, in his role, he will be focusing on expanding the foundation's global network and will further position the foundation as a leader in addressing global food insecurity. That's directly off of the news release that they sent out.
Yeah. Seems like a good fit, and especially coming off of being a USDA secretary, he's going to have all these connections with other countries and other leaders and kind of bringing this all together. I guess it sounds like a good fit for him and sounds like it fits with his priorities. And he will be replacing the CEO, Terry Branstad. Just a quick little fun fact here. They both were governor of Iowa. So Branstad was the governor of Iowa right before Vilsack took over in 1999. So
Huh,
there's that. I just thought that was a fun little fact that
it is.
how often do 2 Iowa governors land in this kind of role?
Yeah, I did not know that. I don't honestly, I don't know a whole lot about Iowa anyway or their governors, but um, it seems like this seems like such a natural fit for former Secretary Vilsack, again, because sustainability and hunger were such a big part of his platform when he was Ag Secretary. So this seems like the perfect position for him.
Yes, and him being on that board, as you mentioned, I'm sure he was networking along. So there you go.
Yeah, right. I've always kind of wondered, like, after you've had a secretary position, in the cabinet, in the president's cabinet, like, where do you go from
I
there?
know. I know.
Like, how do you follow that up? Apparently, it's with the World Food Prize Foundation.
I've thought about that too with all cabinet positions. Like, where do you go next? But it doesn't,
Right.
you know what? Do you just retire out? I don't know,
I mean,
but
I think I would.
I would.
No,
Yes, me
yeah,
too.
heck yeah. But I suppose if you have a mission in life, you want to just keep on going. Uh, but I like, okay, let's say you're the Secretary of Defense. What do you do after
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, I know. That's exactly what I mean. Like I think about that with all cabinet. I always have. It's like
Yeah.
you do, and sometimes they land as directors of organizations and CEOs or become well, I don't know if they
Yeah.
become lobbyists, but they do a lot with policy
Yeah.
with some of these organizations, some of them commercial and private and others more of the affiliate organizations. So I know they land in some of those places, at least in the agriculture side of things. But like the Secretary of Defense, that's a good point. I have no idea.
Yeah. What do you do? I think you just retire and live out your life. Well, it is time for us to retire, at least for the day. So thank you so much for joining us. This has been the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. She's Lorrie Boyer. Have a great morning.
To get more information on the topics you heard today, visit AgNet West at agnetwest.com. You can also stay connected by following us on our social media at AgNet West on Facebook, Instagram, and X. Also look for Sabrina Halvorson on Facebook and be sure to subscribe to our podcast by searching for AgNet West on your podcast app. Thank you for listening to the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. AgNet West Radio Network, your primary choice for agriculture news.